Thank you, Dan and ACU, for welcoming us here for our Tribal Sovereignty Forum. My name is Brandon Ashley, and I'll be the moderator for today. I am Navajo, and I am also the Senior Policy Advisor for the Senate Committee on Indian Affairs for Chairman John Hoeven, and I will go and turn it on over to Mr. Witherspoon. If you want to go and introduce yourself.
Certainly apologize for coming in late, coming directly from the plane, a little delayed flight from Chicago. I am Dwight Witherspoon, and typically we introduce ourselves by our clans and who we're related to. And so my clan comes from my mother, and she's from the Tuchini clan, or Red Running Into the Water people. And then my second clan comes from my father's side, and he is, his mother was German. So we use the term Basbacha, which is the people that had the hard metal hats from the World War. And so that's the way they're described as a German people. And that's my second clan. My third clan comes from my father, my mother's father's side, and that's Betahni, or under the cover clan. And then my fourth clan is from my father's side, which is Scottish. And my father came from certainly from back east here in towards Ohio. And John Witherspoon actually was one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And so I have a great heritage on my father's side, but I also have a great heritage on my mother's side, coming from a family that had 12 children, and their father was a medicine man called a roadman as well. And I appreciate the opportunity to be here. If we're doing introductions first, I can stop right there.
I'm Congressman Mullen, Markwood Mullen from Oklahoma. Up until this year, there was just two Native Americans in Congress. It was Tom Cole, it's Chickasaw. I'm Cherokee, and where I live is where my family has literally lived for generations since we arrived in Oklahoma. We still stay on the same Indian allotment land. The ranch has grown considerably since then. I tell everybody that I never knew I was special for being Indian until I came to Washington, D.C. I've always lived, my family's always lived where we are right now. And it's unique because where I'm from, you're either Indian or everybody wants to be. I could take a jab at a senator there, but I'm not going to. And yeah, I will. Senator, no, I won't. Anyways, where we are at, you don't realize the issues that go on in Native country because everybody's dealing with the same things. See, as I said, I've always lived there. I didn't really see the differences. I really didn't see the differences until I got into Congress and I started traveling around to different areas around Indian country, and I started using different type of health care too because I grew up with Hastings at IHS. There's a lot of issues that we have to address, but at the end of the day, we're all fighting for the same thing. We just come from different parts around the world, right? So with that, I'll turn it over.
CJ?
First of all, I just want to greet everybody here. You know, I'm from the Apsalagan Nation. That's the name I go by within my nation. Ashilalio, that's my clan, and the newly made lodges. And so with that, you know, I served on my council for 8 years, 2 terms, and I served in several capacities. You know, I've been honored to serve on several capacities with the state and with different folks, and been a part of a lot of historic moments. Yet again, you know, I'm honored to be here. I'm honored to be here, and you know, to be able to sit with these distinguished gentlemen here and be able to talk to you a little bit about a day in my shoes. And so I appreciate that.
Thank you, everyone. So kind of mirroring off what Congressman Wayne McMullen just stated is that there's been a lot of talk lately about Native Americans in the press lately. And perhaps it shouldn't be a big surprise to anyone. There are technically 573 federally recognized tribes in 35 states. And then in addition to that, there are 5 states that actually have state-recognized tribes, and we can probably go into it a little bit further, and maybe it'll be kind of like an organic, dialogue that we'll have between, maybe what's federally recognized tribes and state-recognized tribes. But I guess, the point we're all here for is how can conservatives support and promote tribal sovereignty? And I believe Dan was mentioning earlier on that a lot of this stuff is kind of the basis of what conservatism is all about, being self-reliant, looking after one another, but at the same time, less government regulations. So kind of a lot of us here kind of had the kind of topics I guess we're going to kind of explore up here. And we'll be, like I said, I don't have any rules. This is not a presidential debate by any means. So we don't have a ringer or anything. So kind of chime in as you would like. But the topics here for tribal, obviously, is tribal sovereignty, the U.S. role and relationship with tribes, economic development for tribes, and preserving tribal culture. So I don't know if anyone wants to, actually, you know what? Sejal, why don't you start off a little bit with, you're with the National Tribal Energy Association. Perhaps maybe you can kind of talk about that as kind of a way of knowing that tribes, how they use tribal sovereignty in terms of building economic development.
Sure. I serve on the as a managing director for the National Tribal Energy Association and co-founder of the organization as well. And one of the things that I think that needs to be mentioned is, and I'm going to say it first and foremost. When Trump said he wants energy dominance, you can't have it without the nations. You can't have it without the tribes. 60% of the nation's resources are owned by the nations, the tribes. Out of them 573 federally recognized sovereign nations, not everyone has land. The ones that do have land and the ones that do have resource and the ones that do control that resource, there's 12 tribes. Mainly 4 of them, Navajo being one, Crow being another, Southern Ute, and then you've got the Awajah, the 3 affiliate tribe. They own all the oil in the Bakken, 30% to be precise of the production of the Bakken. And so with those kinds of numbers, and then you take a look at the trouble that Navajo's going through with NGS and Four Corners, and you look at the trouble that Crow tribe is going through with depletion of production of our resources, and we have 10% of the nation's resources, 3% of the world's. We're the largest private coal owner in the nation, yet we only averaging 3 million right now. There's something wrong with that picture when we're talking about sovereignty. When we want to go out there and develop more resources, there's always these impediments. And when somebody wants to talk about impediments that are roadblocking tribes and their economic well-being and their economic sovereignty moving forward, it's always the U.S. government. The U.S. government had created impediments that puts a stop to everything that we're trying to do. And when they talk about the 49 steps before you can even get a bid in the ground, when you're talking about the 49 steps in 4 agencies, and when we're talking about coal, you're talking about 5 agencies. And for every agency, they keep a sheet of paper there for approval on the development project on their desk for 180 days per agency. And so when you got that kind of problems and impediments going on in Indian country, it makes it pretty hard. So when you got folks coming on board to try to do some work with the tribes, whether it be Navajo, whether it be Southern Ute, whether it be the 3 affiliate tribe, or Osage or Alaska, whatever they're going to try to do on that land, they have to go through these agencies.
Let me chime in on that real quick too, because I got Indian country to some degree went after me one time when I said that, because they said I was trying to privatize Indian country. That's not what I said at all. They 100% misquoted me. What I said is that Indian land should be treated like private land. Not privatized, but private. It is treated like a national park right now. And it is nearly impossible to be able to go after the resources that are sovereign to us, because we are a sovereign nation, because they treat it like a national park. But when you go try to take that same resource on private land, the barriers are cut literally by 2/3. And this is what the gentleman's trying to say right now. There is barriers put in place, paperwork upon paperwork upon paperwork, that Indian country that could use their economic engine that can be brought by the natural resources. We can't achieve that financial freedom because we can't get to it because we're having to ask Big Brother permission. Yet we're sovereign. Something's inherently wrong with that. And so we're going in these circles. We're going around in circles. And we want to be treated sovereign. The United States wants to say we're sovereign, but yet they still want to tell us how to take care of our backyards. Come on. Who's going to take better care of our backyards, us or some bureaucrat in Washington, D.C.? As I said, we're generational on my land, and the same thing with all these other reservations that are out there. It's generational. We're not going anyplace. But yet somebody in Washington, D.C. says they know how to take care of it better. That's absolutely ridiculous and absurd.
Dwight, do you have something to add from the Navajo Nation perspective?
Yes, I've really been thinking about how I wanted to try to connect to the body and certainly the audience here. And so,
Actually, maybe you should explain maybe just a bit about the Navajo Nation.
yeah, the Navajo Nation is in 4 different states. It's in Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. It is 27,000 square miles. It's large as West Virginia. We have 360,000 members. And we have Navajos all around the world. We have a 3-branch government. And we certainly, and this is why I wanted to try to connect with you. How many in here anybody ever been a rancher? Okay. How many in here are teachers? Wonderful. Anyone veterans? Wonderful. We have generally in native population, generally the most kind of percentage of veterans, and certainly the Navajo Nation has wonderful code talkers that helped in the World War. The analogy I wanted to use is this 573 tribes or nations are just like, how many of you are parents? So each of you have, if you have more than one child, they're unique. And each of these tribes are unique and very different. The concern that they're bringing up that I wanted to convey as well is you want your child to be able to become self-reliant and independent. I'm sure as parents you don't want to have to pay for their vehicle, their monthly rent for into their 30s or 40s, or like tribes in 2020 and 21, and pay for, 2/3 certainly of the Navajo Nation's budget. We're operating certainly a number of federal programs, and we administer them. We contract to administer them, but that's where a lot of our budget comes from. For us, as we have been, last year was the 150 year of signing our 1868 treaty with the United States. We want to be financially independent, and federal policy has acculturated us to a dependency. And we need help to change some of the laws, some of them intentional, some of them unintentional. But the status of the land, if you go to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, it states that you need to be able to control your own land and resources. Can you imagine what the change in the Navajo Nation's access to capital would be if we had deed to the 27,000 square miles? I had a business owner who was our previous economic development director. It took him 4 years to get through our business regulatory process, and he owned Denny's, and he was managing a motel, and he was trying to establish a second Denny's in a different community. It took him 4 years to go through the business stuff, and then it took him 6 years to get the financing. We need help because our hands are tied behind our back economically, and it really does deal with the status of the land. So
how many of you guys
speaking
understand what he
about-
means by the deed? How many of you guys understand that? Okay, I know you jumping because I didn't think they understood. The financing, it's difficult to get the financing for economic development inside Indian country because a lot of times when you're building, what's your collateral? The land, right. It's next to impossible to get the financing when you're building a building and no one has the deed except the federal government and you can't finance it. And there's a reason why they do that, but we're sovereign, but yet we're not sovereign. We're sovereign as a nation, but not the land we walk on. But yet at the same time, the federal government isn't going to take care of it like they would their interstate systems or Washington, D.C. And they say it's our responsibility, but it's not. It is or it isn't. Which one? You can't have it both ways. So I wanted to stop. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I knew people didn't understand that because where we're from, everybody understands it, right?
That's true.
And I had to learn to talk a little bit different and explain it a little bit different ways too, because I just made the assumption that everybody understood it because all my neighbors did.
Well, the example of the new market tax credits, to be able to take advantage of it, that because of the federal trust land, certainly being able to not use the land was creating the opportunity where you couldn't take advantage of the new market tax credits. There's potential for empowerment zones to be able to get access into our communities that could be a benefit. There are things that can help, but there are certainly some impediments. And so just like you think of these 573 children, we want to be able to become self-reliant.
So Dwight, why don't we take a little pause on that front? So are you trying to advocate or say to our audience and to other folks that the federal government still is trying to be a big parent and not allow tribes who are sovereign to be let on their own? Why does the federal government not feel like they are wanting to allow their kids that access and to grow up, I guess, so to speak, with your analogy that you've brought to us? And anyone else can chime in as well.
It comes to
Right,
the status that he talked about.
Right.
The land is actually considered like a national park. And so anytime you want to develop, let's say, a road.
Yeah, try to build a road through a national park. Try to build a house in a national park. Try to put a Denny's in a national park. It doesn't happen.
And it becomes very difficult, essentially, to get the infrastructure in place that's needed to foster, our economies in our reservations. And so that's...
I understand what he's, gentleman here from Navajo is saying, and I understand the analogy. I know some people would probably get upset with that analogy, but, I'm a little bit more thick-skinned than that. But the thing is, when you talk about children and the government as being parent, being like a paternal, it's more or less we're like the hidden stepchild.
I was going to say it's more
And
like
so
more like a forced parent.
So when you're talking about children, you're talking about parents, you associate it with love. There's no love in this, and when you look at and you go back to the history of everything, you know, we don't want to go around with a chip on our shoulder, but then again, you don't, the only way history repeats itself in a negative manner, according to a society, is if you don't know your history. And so by us trying to understand our history and trying to make sure that through our tribal colleges, through our sovereignty, that we continue to pray in our schools and teach our kids how to do the ceremonies, teach our kids the songs of the ceremonies, teaching our kids the language of the ceremonies. The thing is when you talk about culture and the preservation of the culture, if you don't have economic sovereignty on a reservation, where do these people go? Where do our people go? They'll go off, you know, into like Navajo. They might all go into Phoenix, or over here in Montana, they might go to Denver, or they might go to Billings, Montana, and live there amongst people that don't speak Crow. And for people that don't understand the fact that to have two languages and to have that understanding, English doesn't say it all. You know, our language it comes with a feeling, you know, of the soul. And so as we're talking, sometimes we can't say words in English that you would be able to say in our language. And so as we're trying to continue to teach our kids these languages, and yet we're turning to the government and saying, give us money to teach our kids language, when it should start at home. And the thing is, we're falling into that rat trap, because when you go out there before, in the warrior days, Cherokee, Navajo, Crow, whatever it may be, we went out there and we hunted the deer. We went out there and we hunted the elk, the buffalo. What did those animals do? They went off and they ate the good grass in areas where where the grass was, where the water was. And all along, as they're doing this, predators around them, the weak get pulled away from the herds. And so it is, as the tribes go in there and they get their deer, or they get their elk, and they get their buffalo, we're used to eating meat that wants to survive, that wants to thrive. And so just like the white man has a saying, you are what you eat. Back then we were lean, we were in shape. We didn't have the diabetes, we didn't have the cancer, and we had pelts that we traded in through in our trades and everything that we did. We utilized everything of the animals, and as we were, our health was good. But when we started eating the spotted buffalo, they call them, you know, and then pretty soon, you know, we started having problems. They marble these animals with man-made injections, and as you're eating the chicken and you're eating the beef, pretty soon we become marbled. Pretty soon we become marbled, and yeah, we can laugh at that. It's funny, but you are what you eat. And if all you want to do is eat a dumb animal, you're going to be a dumb animal. And that's what society and government is trying to put us in a position where we're just sitting there as dumb animals, and we can't go anywhere and hunt like we used to. They fight against our treaty hunting. They fight against our fishing rights. They fight against everything that we're trying to do economically, and trying to utilize this, even trying to tell us we can't speak our language. I grew up in an era where I still got whipped for speaking my language. Now think about this. Who's all white in here? Raise your hand. You're white. I see a lot of you guys. Now think about this. What if you had to come over here and sit on a panel and explain exactly what we're doing right now to you? And a bunch of Indians are sitting out there. Now think about this. You don't have to worry about what we have to worry about. We're continually coming to Washington, D.C., trying to define who we are, trying to re-educate the new congressmen or the new senators and stuff like that. And so we're always trying to re-educate. I guess I cut my time off here.
No, I mean, we've kind of identified a lot of the problems that tribes and tribal nations and governments are facing. So I guess now we can kind of revert back to maybe something that Congressman Mark Wayne Mullen deals with on a daily occasion, which is how do we solve these issues? And we know that tribes are sophisticated. They now have tribal governments. They have working courts, police officers. So they are looking like they can be self-sustained and they can do their own self-governance, which is one of the things that Congress has created and turned into law several decades ago, in particular under President Nixon. So I guess we can kind of go after that, and I know that there's probably one maybe kind of importance that we can kind of all chime in on at one point in time from our panelists here, which is the Tribal Labor Sovereignty Act. And I know that you're a co-sponsor on that bill, and maybe that's a good way of kind of putting everything into perspective of identifying a problem that tribes have gone through over the years, and then trying to explain it to the non-conservatives on why this is something that needs to be addressed and done.
Well, there's several things that you mentioned there. But let's just talk about one, our role in the federal government. For some reason, and I don't say this as a backhand to anybody, but for some reason the majority of Indian country identifies with the Democrat Party. And I've spoke literally all over the country about this. When really, if you think about what Indian country has been fighting for is independence, get away from me, less government. Less government. I want to be self-reliant. I want to hunt where I want to hunt, and I want to eat what I want to eat, and I'll be the person that's going to take care of the animals to make sure that they're still there for generations. I understand the overpressure that we can create, and we're not going to hunt just for antlers. We're going to be hunting for food. We know that. And through Indian country, we have been fighting for centuries to get out of our way. And now there's a big divide between the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. And this is supposed to be, how does Indian country line up with conservatives? We're fighting for the same thing. We want to break it down to the bare bones. Let us pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our way. But we do deal with an education issue. It's not that there's a love loss between Congress and throughout Indian country. It is a lack of understanding. I literally was asked a question when I said I still live on the same allotment land where my family came from. And I mean, it's just across the Arkansas state line. Literally, our back fence is Arkansas. I just assumed my ancestors just said, I'm here, I'm done. I'm not going any farther, you can't make me. I'm in Indian country now. I just assumed something like that took place. But I was asked, does your family still live, and I saw the question coming 1,000 miles away. I was like, are you seriously going to ask me this? No, we do not live in a teepee. We have modern housing with modern plumbing and modern TV. Guess what? We even have a computer. Wow. And they didn't mean it in any type of harmful way, but guys, we make decisions based on two things. Any of us, all of us, make decisions based on two things: our life experiences and the way we're raised. I don't care what it is, how you form your answer, it's going to come off of one of those things. We all have different life experiences, and we all been raised different. We were just happened to be raised in Indian country. I didn't grow up on a reservation, though. That's not what Oklahoma has. We have trust land. Life on a reservation is drastically different. We talk about tribes and having their infrastructure. Not all tribes have the infrastructure because they don't have the finances that, say, Cherokee does, or the Chickasaws have, or the Choctaws have. You get up in the plains, they're broke. They don't have anything. Our health care isn't even consistent. But it could be. It could be. We can take care of ourselves. We're self-reliant. The government's role is never to create a job. is to create an environment where entrepreneurs create a job. Indian country, tribes are a bunch of entrepreneurs if we had the opportunity to do it.
I appreciate those comments very much. My, I guess, kind of analogy that I was wanting to convey is kind of like when we go to the state of New Mexico. In New Mexico, we have a very much respected and honored relationship with the state of New Mexico. And they provide, significant dollars to help our infrastructure, from our senior citizen centers, for roads, for water, for chapters, for a significant amount of things. They have a concept that what's
Actually,
good for Navajo
Let me
is-
stop you there, because I think some folks in the audience may not know why this is. I don't know if someone wants to explain, maybe just briefly, what the trust treaty responsibility of why these services are given to tribes and tribal members.
Well, it comes from the state, has a tribal infrastructure fund, and they set aside some of the state dollars that they have for infrastructure specific for
So
tribes.
I don't know if that's what that's not what you're asking, is it?
Yeah, I was
Or-
thinking more of just in
So,
general, broad terms.
Listen, the trust, the treaties, the responsibility of the federal government is to pay for the land that was stolen from us. It's just that simple. We were told that if you move from your traditional lands and you get pushed to where you're going and you condense it and we can hold you right here and you're not supposed to leave this, we're going to provide you for X, Y, and Z, health service, food, and education. That's in a nutshell. It is still payment for that. That was a guarantee. That was part of the trust. And if they don't, then they're breaking that trust. That was the big fight during the government shutdown when we were threatened to lose funding for Indian health services. I was screaming from the mountaintops, literally from the hill. No pun intended there. That's funny, guys. The hill, Capitol. Come on, go with me. Yeah. I was saying, guys, we're in breach of breaking treaties. We're in breach of trust right now. And people didn't understand it until I broke it down to them. So is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Well, certainly the trust responsibility that the federal government has. So any of you that certainly have funds in bank or in the market, you have certainly people that have fiduciary responsibility and a trust responsibility to your funds. Well, the United States has also a trust responsibility to each of these 573 nations. The concept that I want you to come away with is, if Navajo is doing well in the state of New Mexico, they know that that's going to be good for the state of New Mexico. And so we don't have that same concept quite in Arizona or in Utah yet. But what I want to convey is, if 573 nations are doing well, becoming self-reliant, that's good for the United States of America as well. That's what I wanted to convey, certainly. Thank you.
I wanted to add to what Dwight had said, and what Congressman is talking about is concerning trust. I think a lot of people need to really understand that, when we're talking about treaties, and then you're talking about, tribes, not all tribes and not all tribes have treaties, and not all tribes are the same. You got tribes that are IRA tribes, Indian Reorganization tribes, which basically, when they pass law, the superintendent or the secretary of the Department of Interior has to approve their law. Now you got treaty tribes where it's equal to or greater than tribal law will prevail. And I can say that my tribe is a treaty tribe, and we have treaty. In fact, right now we're involved with a treaty hunting case that just now got read into the Supreme Court. And so, you know, you had a couple young fellas crossed over the Wyoming border, the imaginary line, and they shot an elk, crossed into the Wyoming, finally got it down, and they finally got to put another bullet into the elk to where it was dead. They were able to, you know, quarter it up, butcher it up, take the meat and everything, and then they walked it back another mile back over to their truck, you know, or mile or two in snow, and so now they're in violation of poaching an animal in Wyoming, where when you have to ask the question, you know, it's like what the congressman said, we're not after antlers, we don't eat antlers, you know, we're hunting for the meat, not, you know, we're dealing with 80 to 90% of unemployment on these reservations, and you know, we got this misconception from the dominant society stating that tribes they just get all this free money. No, it's not free money. We have treaty obligations and we have reserved rights in those treaties that we continually to always have to remind Washington, that we always have to remind the states. And so as we're doing all of this, we're continuing to fight, and we have to pass on down that knowledge to the younger ones coming up, because now they don't know what they're fighting for. You have to tell them what they've been fighting for. You have to tell them what we're fighting for when it comes to the treaty and the reserved rights. And a treaty is not a list of rights given to a tribe. It's a list. It's basically rights retained in that treaty that the tribe holds to itself, and that we utilize. And so, you know, when you look at Article 4 of the United States Constitution, we're listed in there, the tribes. And so, and going back to the, you know, to the economic side, I want to kind of touch up on that. The Indian Commerce Clause, you know, no one really looked at that. No one ever really looked at that, and until now. Now you have the Dakota Access Pipeline situation. Now had the Energy Transfer Partners got a hold of some tribes to help them, you know, mitigate some of these issues, it wouldn't have blown up to that situation that they're in. And if the Obama administration understood the Indian Commerce Clause, that the states have no authority over the tribes' commerce, the only ones that do is Congress, that this would have never happened.
I totally agree with that.
Because that pipe that's going under that in the Missouri River, that's flowing with a lot T's oil coming out of the MHA Nation in North Dakota, and so that's actually transferring a trust resource through there that the state has no authority of even speaking to. We're immune from the states' rights issues because of the Indian Commerce Clause. And so that's something that we need to recognize.
And it's too often that we run into this. And I tell developers that are wanting advice on, you know, when they're having infrastructure issues, they come into my office and they talk to me, and I say, first of all, go talk to those that have claims to that land. Go meet with the sovereign nations, with the tribes, and ask. Don't tell them where you're bringing the pipeline through. Ask if they would help you develop this, help you to get a path forward. People are not anti anything. They just don't like being backed into a corner. You back a dog in the corner, what happens? You get bit. And too often they show up and they say, here's the map, this is where we're going. Yes, we are. No, we're sovereign. No, we have intimate domain. Doesn't apply to us. Doesn't apply to us.
So we're running out of time here in a bit, so I don't know if we want to open up for a couple questions from the audience.
Yeah. Who would have thought Gavin had been
I
first,
know,
right?
I know.
mean, really.
Front row almost, too.
He raised his hand on all three questions that was asked a while ago, by the way.
Well, so one issue you talked about entrepreneurship, and obviously one of the big issues that suppresses entrepreneurship on the reservation, and it actually started in New Mexico, is the fact that non-Indians coming on the reservation to open up a business get taxed twice as much
Right.
as Indians. And this is a dual taxation problem. It's disastrous for tribal energy resources. It's disastrous for entrepreneurship. In New Mexico, our unemployment on our reservations is 56%, and yet it's the Democrats that are And I think that's a good wedge issue that we can focus, is that part of the education issue is point out that Republicans are generally for a reduced tax burden, and we would support, and I know President McGay was big on this before at Navajo, that dual taxation is the death of tribal economies. Ronald Reagan said it, Richard Nixon said it, it's been something that's been a bedrock conservative principle. You reduce taxes on job creators in any country, you create more jobs.
Well, that's probably a good way to end. I've been told that our time has ended here, but thank you all for your participation and joining us here for our discussion on tribal
Thank you
sovereignty.
guys, appreciate it.